Welcome to Zero Gravity's podcast. Today, I've got my good friend from Mighty. He is the co-founder and CEO. Johnny, for people that are completely unfamiliar with Mighty, could you give us a brief rundown of what you guys are hoping to accomplish there?
Yeah, so we saw a problem space that really not a lot of people are tackling. So if you see, today the frontier providers like OpenAI is, building agents that can do tasks on your behalf. And if we see a world where agents is going to represent us or do things for us, using human auth don't scale, right? What I mean by that is recapture problems like asking you to log in manually. If you have like five or six services that you're chaining service calls with, it doesn't make sense to interrupt you five or six times, right, throughout the process. So we thought to ourselves, if agents and AI are going to succeed, and especially working with private data, we need to re-envision whole system because agents don't need UI, and the current tooling that we have today are centered around UI-based interactivity. So we thought to ourselves, let's build something around the space of reimagining agent authentication and policy, whereby anyone can set those policies against the services they're doing. So that's what Mighty in a nutshell is about.
Very, very cool. And what led you to? How did you notice this problem? What led you to co-founding this company?
Yeah, I think the core area is like just asking and seeing what's out there, right? Like fundamentally, I think Web3 has always been fundamentally building first rather than like asking if there's a need or problem space. For us, we more about asking, is there a problem space? And if you look across the board, AI started in public data and now, enterprise is getting noticed, but they're not touching private infrastructure with like a million foot pole because of concerns of privacy, security, transparency, control, and compliance. And so we thought to ourselves, well, how do you get enterprise to adopt? And so we started looking at old playbooks that was really successful. So we saw, when AWS came out in the early 2000s, not many enterprise adopted it. People were still using bare metal on-prem private cloud on their own side, and not private cloud, sorry. And so they fundamentally saw, like in order to create trust, they built things like called identity management and role-based permissioning. So that opened up a lot of use cases. And then you have services like Okta brought in SSO, and Auth0 brought in like OAuth 2.0. And so for us, what is that equivalent in AI? How do you make sure each discrete services out there, whether it's, US government or legal service or FinTech, how could they talk to each other today? And within Web3, we've been doing that since the start, right? Like in the industry wise, we assume every service is Sybil, malicious, and we're communicating even in this assumption. And so I think bringing that technology, bringing that learning, bringing that understanding to Web2 clients is something that we discover as a advantage point from Mighty's perspective.
Absolutely. And let's walk through what that means for, let's the example of an agent. At BlackRock, we always used to do this life of a transaction or life of, working with Mighty. So talk us through essentially where people would come into contact this. Is this I spin up the Jax agent and I need to communicate with, Stripe and a few other different services? They talk to us a little bit about like what the life cycle of using Mighty is.
Yeah, so first of all, you would need a Mighty account. And so anyone can create an account either as a user or as a developer account. So assuming you are a user, you would create a private data vault. Behind the scene, it can capture any information about you that you're willing to provide. It's client-side encrypted, which means your key, your data. Before it's sent to our server, all private information you can put in ranges from first name, last name, mailing address, login credentials, passports, whatever you want to put. And it's encrypted with a 256-bit key. And so what that means is any services that develop with our SDK, whether that's, payment or legal or fintech, it would feel like a very much like a sort of an OAuth experience. So what you do is when you encounter this AI agent service that's deployed, you would just grant private data access. It would look very similar to an OAuth experience where you will see what private data it needs. So it could be like first name, last name, passport, if you're using a passport renewal as an example. And then it might say, hey, we also need a headshot photo that exists in your Google Drive, right? And also $180 to renew. So behind the scene, we orchestrate it with all the complexity for the end user. So the end user simply review what private data it needs, how long it needs it, and how many occurrence it needs, and then they simply agree. Behind the scene, we do all the encryption. We work with different providers, different ecosystems. And so you can see the payment side fitting in with like Coinbase's recent announcement with their X402 protocol, or it could be stablecoin or anything. But all that is abstracted away. And then the agent on the behind the scene will then orchestrate that task and complete that task without the user understanding all the complexity while still reaping the benefit of security and transparency on how their private data is being used.
Got it. And for listeners that may be less technically inclined, so we could think of this as similar to what Johnny was saying earlier. It's like the OAuth experience. You're going to check the boxes of things that it's going to have access to. So let's say I don't even know if you guys would allow this, but like maybe medical records gated behind here, and you're like, okay, I need to do some kind of like research on my latest blood report, and then I could give a certain agent or a certain service encrypted access to that data for a specific amount of time. Is that about right?
Time and occurrence, yes.
Time and occurrence.
Because the current infrastructure today, like OAuth 2, right now what like OpenAI operator is doing or any agent protocol is doing is they're asking you to log in and then you give access to your authentication cookie, which is very dangerous, right? Like if you're a VP of a company, someone can literally create a Sybil service to like steal that person's, you know, OAuth credential cookie. And so fundamentally, that's really dangerous. And so that's why no enterprise today want to use agent frameworks because there's no compliance and clarity around security and control. So we're rebuilding all that stack to fundamentally focus on enterprise unlock. And so so that's why we're setting like things like very short access from milliseconds to 5-10 minutes, and then locking it down to one-time use or two-time use. And then we enforce it on our server on our services, so that way, if someone steals that cookie or that token, they will not be able to replay it. Similar to how there's no replay attacks on things like smart contracts. So we're thinking about the same way about preventability, but also clarity and audits across our service.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about enterprise adoption. Usually, when we're talking with Web3 companies, it's usually Web3 to Web3 companies. Not many people kind of cross the divide of like going from Web3 to Web2. Talk to us a little bit about like how you're seeing other AI companies or people kind of outside of the crypto sphere starting to look at this and being like, oh, this is very interesting because we're lacking that kind of trust mechanism between agents and enterprise.
Yeah, I think it's about, for us, it's not necessarily what we in the Web3 space can provide. I think it's about what value it can be better in the space. Like for Web3 to consumer, it's about convenience. And I don't think yet we fully achieved that. I mean, services like Privy has made it really easy for everyday applications like Moonshot, Blackbird to feel seamless with embedded wallets. And so the lessons we learned from that is like, what is that equivalent in enterprise? So enterprise cares about control, cares about security, cares about transparency, but also cares about audits, right? And most of Web3 isn't compliant. What I mean by that is the right to delete, right? If someone uploaded accidentally, secret information, or even just take, for example, payroll. Payroll has a lot of sensitive information, has name, has address. It doesn't make sense to put that on a blockchain, right? So most of blockchain's use cases cannot be used for payroll for a company. So if you're running payroll for, let's say, Microsoft, Web3 is never a contendant, like usable, viable solution because there isn't a way. Now, there's technology such as FAG, TEEs and all that stuff, but that adds a lot of barricades. So then why would someone use that over Gusto or Ripple or whatever it is, right? So fundamentally, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, okay, given that these barriers are harder on the on-ramp side, can we do something better? And I think that's where agents is. I think agents with the current payment rail today, whether that's credit cards or debits or banking information, it's much harder because they were made without the thought of speed and security. It's mainly on human level speed and security, not necessarily agents. So we were thinking to ourselves, can we target things like industries like FinTech and legal, where there's a lot of private data, there's a lot of concern about transparency and control as well as security. And can we bring the learnings that we did in Web3 to that industry. And what I mean by that is, assuming every services out there needs to talk to someone else, like JP Morgan needing to talk to Morgan Stanley, and legal firm one needs to talk with his defense side of legal firm. Can you automate processes that can use something like that? And I think a lot of that learning can apply, and that's what we're doing with enterprise use cases. And so we're still early in that, but I do think the conversations so far have been quite great.
So we talked about kind of legal and finance maybe being early adopters. So is this mostly geared towards agents as it appears? It's like, hey, we expect in the future there's going to be way more maybe finance agents running payroll, which are going to have access to sensitive information. So we'll need this kind of cross company communication with high security. And then I assume you also, yeah, kind of talk us through maybe your prediction on where agents are going and why we'll need this type of infrastructure.
Yeah, so our infrastructure only works on private data. So it's and TEEs, whether that's virtualized TEEs like AWS, Nitro, or bare metal, it's going to be expensive. Most consumers are not going to pay for this, and so the unlock is going to be enterprise. And at the enterprise level, our core focus is like, there's a lot of contract data between two parties, whether that's buying an acquisition or doing things before a public listing for IPO or whatever it is. There could be asymmetric data being shared. And I think TEs and agents have a really good capability to be used, but hiring, people in the process is not only expensive, but they're also purview to that information. And I think the advancements within things like FHEs and zero knowledge and ZK-TLS can actually open up new use cases that most Web2 companies are not aware of. And these are open source protocols and paradigms that can open up new worlds. But I think packaging in a way that's digestible, magic moments, and also easy to understand across both technical and non-technical is key. And so for us, is more about how can we enable that to work with like one-click deployment, understanding that they have existing tools that they use on AWS, Azure, Oracle, whatever, and meet them where they are at. So that's how we think about it from that side.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And talk to us a little bit about how a developer they're hearing this, they're like, yes, this is exactly what I need. How would they integrate with Mighty?
Yeah, so we have Python SDK already released. Right now, obviously, Python is the de facto language for all AI and AI machine learning tools. So if you want to use it with Crew AI or LangChain, or even like Crossmint's Goat framework, they're all written in Python or they have Python support. So fundamentally, we're starting there. Our SDK unlocks the complexity of encryption, private data orchestration, private data use cases. And so fundamentally, the developer can just focus on building the best private data agent service and not have to ever worry about where that data is stored because all that information is handled by the SDK as well as our service layer with full transparency on both sides, the borrower as well as the user.
Got it, got it. So talk to us a little bit about maybe the I remember interviewing David from the Lit protocol, and he was saying we may see the death of the agent economy, or sorry, the death of the app economy in favor of the agent economy. Do we use foresee a world where we're mostly interacting with agents, like that's going to be our primary vector of AI interaction, or how do you kind of see AI Web3 evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, I think solving for real world use cases is the only way. I don't see necessarily a clear division between Web 2 and Web 3. Fundamentally, if you're fully solving for a use case, why does it matter to differentiate what is Web 2 or Web 3? Fundamentally, I've been in the industry as a crypto miner, as a Bitcoin miner back in 2011. And so I've seen almost several cycles, but fundamentally I think delivering value, delivering core unlock for industries is key. And I think for us, it's like, how could we do that at a larger scale? And what I think David is alluding to from Lit is that fundamentally, agents has the ability to process, think, and compute and compute. And so I think it opens up a new paradigm, unlike applications which tends to be stale and one-noted. And so, yes, there is that, but we have not yet solved the compliance side. We have not yet solved the private data use cases. We have not developed trust for enterprise where most data are going to be held or going to be used. You need to provide a way to, allow them to control the knobs, but also give them full visibility to what they're doing and still get what they want. Because just like liquidity in this cycle is hard to move, right? It is going to be even be harder for enterprise to move their data from their siloed wall garden. So we know that this is a problem. And so why not meet them where they are at, allowing them to orchestrate their own policy, allowing their policies, to be posted publicly, which doesn't leak any private data. So any agents that wants to interact with U.S. government or legal service A, legal service B, or fintech A, they know beforehand what private data and what information it needs to interact with it, whether that's payment first or policy or authentication. That's all clear. And so for us, that's how we're thinking about it. We're making our service as agnostic as possible, but while still first focusing on our wedge within the fintech and legal side. So I do think, yes, in the long-term vision for agent-to-agent communication to foster and prosper, solving these core protocol is like SSL, right? You won't shop today on a site unless you know there's an SSL certificate on a website. We think the same thing for agents. Like in order for any enterprise or anyone who's sending sensitive data, they're not going to post they're not going to give their passport information to OpenAI today to say, hey, can you do X and Y? It's just not possible, right? Like, and I think and once you solve that, it does open up a new world use case. So I do think, yes, maybe in 3 to 5 years, at the rate of where AI and AI agents innovations are happening. But until that's solved and costs are driven down from TEEs, I do think we need to first focus on that first.
That makes complete sense. And then finally, where are some of the like milestones, some of the things that communities can look forward to from you guys?
Yeah, one of the core areas is that we are working with our partners like Nillion to launch hackathons. And so if you're technical, we'll be soon announcing some initiatives that you can be building with. But if you're not technical, we love to learn like what are things that you guys are wanting to see and what are things that. But I think the best way is to follow our Discord and Twitter. We put out information, but we will be going to great length to try to create different demos in the next few months to showcase what are some of the capabilities that can be unlocked both on the Web 2 side as well as Web 3 technologies. And yeah, we're also our team is headed to New York Tech Week next week. So if there's anyone there too who wants to meet up, feel free to DM or reach out via Twitter.
Absolutely. Well, everyone go get involved with Johnny, go get involved with Mighty, and definitely check out those hackathons if you are on the technical side. And to everyone else, let's continue building the future of on chain. Thank you so much for coming.